But what I'll do is I'll start the session now, because we've got a few people that have joined us now. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Um, let me just get this on. Won't be a moment. So there'll probably be a few more people that join us as we go along. So we'll just invite them in as they turn up. So yeah, thank you for joining us. I am Sandy. I am the grants team officer here at Northamptonshire Community Foundation. And today we're just going to go through the key things you'll need to know if you're applying for funding from us. So we'll cover the key eligibility criteria and what documents you need. I'll also briefly explain different types of charity and community group structures so you can understand what might apply to your organisation. So this session, it's particularly aimed at new groups or groups who may have previously applied and found they weren't eligible. So some of you may have already received funding from us, and you're very welcome to, whether you're supporting a new group or volunteering elsewhere or just looking for a refresher. But what I thought we would do is I would just do quick introductions just to see who's here. So if everyone's happy to just sort of say your name and which group that you're from. So I've introduced myself. I'll pass over to Laura, my colleague.
Hello, I'm Laura, and I'm Grants and Programmes Officer, Admin Officer, sorry. And I'll pass to Emma.
Hello, sorry, my camera is really temperamental.
That's all right.
I am a referral engagement officer for the BBC Children in Need Emergency Essentials Programme at Family Fund. So I'm just kind of here to see what else is about, sort of thing.
Brilliant. Great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Danielle.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry,
That's all right.
It's not very good. Hi, I'm Danielle. I work at a place called Reach for Health. It's based in Daventry, Northamptonshire. We're a rehabilitation centre. And yeah, I'm the grants and development coordinator here. I'm quite new to the role. So I have done grants and bids in my previous role, but new to Reach for Health. So yeah, just coming for some help and tips and advice really. So thank you.
Brilliant. You're welcome. I think we've been emailing each other, so it's
I
nice
think
to
we
speak
have,
to you.
yeah. Thank you.
Connie, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Connie Penn, VCSE Assembly and Strategic Lead for the Hemingwell Wellbeing Programme.
Fantastic, thank you. And we also have Rook.
Hi, Rook from Restore Northampton, based in central Northampton. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is quite bad, so
That's all
yeah,
right.
if I'm breaking up.
No worries, thank you. And then feel free to, you can leave your camera off if you like. That's not a problem. We'll move over to KTH.
Katie hasn't got a camera or microphone, so I'll just read out what she put in the chat. So she's from Daventry Volunteer Centre, and she runs a small project and currently looking to drive into the world of funding and bids. So excellent. Yeah, nice to see you here.
Thank you. And Manny.
Hello, good morning. My name is Manny, and I am representing Ramguria Board Northampton, where I am fundraising and admin assistant. I have done applications with yourselves before, but I'm just looking for more different techniques and best practices that I can learn from.
Okay, great. And then we have Rebecca from Shine.
Hi there. I'm from Shine, so we support people with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. We've received funding from Northamptonshire over sort of a few years, but just wanted to find out a little bit more about what's going on in the county and a little bit more about the eligibility as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I think last but not least, oh no, we've got a couple more. We've got Susan Liverman.
Hi, morning. My name's
Morning.
Susan. I run a relatively new CIC, the Kindful, and we work with other organisations to reach their participants or improve their wellbeing outcomes with wellbeing that is informed by evidence-based mindfulness. So I've been up and running for about 13, 14 months. I've not applied for grants and I don't have the governance in place to do that. But as I kind of come into the second year, I want to strengthen my governance, add more directors and potentially receive funding so that I can work with other organisations to deliver to participants with funded training rather than paid for. So yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, no, this session is will be ideal for you. And then I think last but not least, Kerry.
Sorry, it took me a second there to
That's all
unmute.
right.
So hi, I'm Kerry. I've recently joined the Frank Bruno Foundation as the new charity centre manager. So I've only been posted a few weeks. So within this role, I've not been applying for funding yet through NCF, but in my previous role with the Northampton Town Football Club Community Trust, applied for a couple of grants there. So the Frank Bruno Foundation is supporting people who are experiencing or who are in recovery from mental health challenges. And we do that through sort of promoting sort of physical as well as mental well-being, non-contact boxing, workshops and sessions around well-being topics and so on. Working with children 10 plus, young people and adults.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and letting us know a bit about what you do. It's good to get an idea of who's here in the room. Okay, so I'll just go ahead with the presentation. So just a little bit about Northamptonshire Community Foundation. So we're an independent grant-making charity, and we support local communities in Northamptonshire. And we address key social issues like poverty, homelessness, reduced inequalities, health and wellbeing, and lots more. We fund around 1 million a year to local charities and community groups. And our approach is we partner with donors to meet local needs and build long-term community resilience. So in terms of actually who can apply, so it can get a bit confusing sometimes. So I'll sort of try and kind of break it down. So you can see this list on the left-hand side. So who cannot apply? So we're unable to support statutory organisations. However, we can support friends of schools or nurseries or PTAs. So in this instance, we only fund activities that are not statutory responsibilities and which usually take place outside of school hours. So there may be exceptions to this depending on the type of activity offered. And we do also encourage school groups to provide activities for the wider community wherever possible, and not just for children at one school. You'll see that we don't fund hospitals or individuals except for sort of specific bursaries, which have quite specific criteria. We don't fund national charities. It is possible to give out to branches of national charities as long as they are independently managed within Northamptonshire with their own bank account and their own management committee. So occasionally we receive applications from groups that are physically based in Northamptonshire and they deliver services locally, but they're registered as working throughout the UK. So if that's the case, if their charitable objects or charity commission registration states that they operate nationally, then that would be considered a national charity and it wouldn't be eligible. So even if their current project is local, and hopefully that sort of makes sense, but we can go through it. And you'll see there that we don't fund parish councils except for things like wind farm funds because they're quite specific in their location and rural locations as well. So the majority of our funds are open. So this is who can apply to community groups, registered charities, community interest companies or CICs, social enterprises and companies limited by guarantee without share capital. You'll see there faith groups. So we can fund faith groups as long as they're independently constituted and providing that their project doesn't promote religious beliefs. I'll just move on to the next slide. So in terms of our key eligibility criteria, so charities and community groups, they must have a minimum of 3 committee members. So it's usually made up of a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer. And the reason for this is that it ensures balanced decision making. So there's no single person has too much control. It ensures accountability. So financial and governance decisions are checked by multiple people, and good practice. So it reflects charity sector standards. Now you see for CICs, it's slightly different, and the requirement is different. It's due to their legal structure. So they are regulated as companies, meaning that they operate under company law rather than charity law. So under these rules, currently CICs must have at least 2 directors who cannot be related. But this is changing from the 1st of April this year. So from the 1st of April, CICs will need a minimum of 3 directors who are not related. So unlike charities, CICs, they don't require a wider membership or committee. And the key reason is because companies, they're structured to allow directors to manage operations directly. So while charities are expected to have broader governance oversight. So an important thing to note for CICs is that to be eligible for funding, a CIC, they must not have a person with significant control, also known as a PSC. This is because a PSC has overriding authority, which goes against our commitment to funding organisations with shared community control. So that's quite an important part of our eligibility criteria for CICs. What I should have mentioned at the beginning as well is I'll go through this sort of presentation, and if anyone has any questions, we can go through them all at the end, and I hope that's all right. So we'll move on to the sort of the supporting documents that we require. So starting with the constitution. So all groups will need to have a constitution. So depending on the type of group that you are, and they can have different names as well, just to mix it up a little bit. So they can be called a governing document, articles of association. But essentially, a constitution, it ensures transparency, accountability, and legal compliance. So especially if the group is seeking funding. So it's essentially the rule book that keeps everything running smoothly. So the constitution, or the governing document, whatever you'd like to call it, it's a formal document that outlines its purpose, its structure, and rules for operation. So it serves as a governing document that sets out how the organisation will be run. So that includes details on the purpose and the objects, so what it aims to do and who it helps, membership, who can join and how, leadership and management, so that's the roles of the trustees or committee members and how the decisions are made. It will cover meetings, so how they happen, how often they happen and what they cover. Finances, so that's rules about managing money and assets. And then changes and dissolution, so how to amend a constitution or close the organisation if needed. So you will see for Northamptonshire Community Foundation, the dissolution clause, it does need to be specific to Northamptonshire, which I'll discuss more in the next slide. So once the management committee have all agreed on the objects, then this needs to be signed by 3 members of the management committee, or if you're a CIC, it needs to be signed by at least 2 directors, but it will be 3 from April. So talking more about the dissolution clause, because this is something that comes up quite regularly and it can be something which makes groups ineligible. So as a place-based funder, our aim is to secure funding for VCSE organisations within the county. And as part of that process, we have a requirement that if an organisation winds down, the remaining assets within Northamptonshire, the remaining assets stay within Northamptonshire. So this just ensures that charitable resources continue to benefit the local community. And you'll see at the bottom here, there is a signing requirement. So to be eligible for NCF support, your constitution, it's got to be signed by 3 members of your committee, and the formal signing just confirms commitment to the charity rules and legal responsibility. So it just makes it binding. So here's some examples of wording of dissolution clauses. The first example is pretty straightforward. It's clear that if they were to wind down, then the remaining assets would go to another group within Northamptonshire. The second example there, I won't read it all, it's a bit wordy, and I will share the slides with everyone afterwards. But if upon winding up or dissolution of the trust, it shall be given or transferred to some other charitable institution with similar objects of the trust. So basically, in this case, as it's not specific in the clause that remaining funds would go to a group in Northamptonshire, this is where, as part of our due diligence, we will look in the objects of the group. So if the objects state Northamptonshire, that's okay for us to accept. But if it's more broad, it doesn't say, then unfortunately that wouldn't be eligible. So it's just kind of little things with wordings which would just need to be updated. CICs, they have something called an asset lock, which is essentially works the same way. So it stops them from selling off assets for private gain. So when those assets were meant for community benefit. So they can choose a specific group to transfer their assets to. But if they're not sure of a specific group, that's okay, as long as the asset lock states that the assets would go to a group within Northamptonshire. So that bit is a very key part of our eligibility criteria. Move on to the next slide. So the next steps would be the bank account requirements. So each group that applies, they must have a bank account in the organisation's name with 2 unrelated signatories. And we always ask for a recent bank statement signed by one of the bank signatories if you're applying for the first time. And annual accounts. So what are annual accounts? So these are different to the bank account. So annual accounts, they provide a summary of your organisation's finances over the past year. So they typically include things like income and expenditure, so breakdown of all money received, so that could be grants, donations, and money spent. It could be, I could have a balance sheet, so a snapshot of what the organisation owns and owes, so it's assets and liabilities. And it could have things like notes or reports, so just additional details on financial activities, funding sources or reserves. So it sounds like quite a lot even for small groups. So even for small groups, what I would say is they still need to maintain basic records of income and spending, is crucial. And for larger organisations or registered charities, there may be legal requirements to submit accounts to regulators. So these are really, really important to keep on top of. And why do funders require annual accounts? It's funders need to see how your organisation manages its money. And that's to ensure funds are being used appropriately and effectively. The organisation is financially healthy and well managed, and there's just a clear record of past funding and expenditures. So even if your group is newly formed and it doesn't yet have a full year of accounts, you should still be keeping basic financial records to demonstrate accountability. We have actually got something on our website which breaks this down even further, which I can share with you at the end, because I know annual accounts can be a bit of a It sounds scary, especially if you've not had to do them before. But it is really important in terms of our funding and eligibility. There is a reference form on our website. So this would need to be completed and signed by an independent referee. And we ask specific questions. So we do ask it to be filled on our own form. And with the reference, we just have to ensure that it's not a relative or someone that's affiliated with your organisation, whether it's a volunteer or staff member. So ideally, it should be someone professional and local. So it could be a counsellor, a teacher, or a representative from another community group or charity. And then this brings us on to the policies that we require. So the top one, so the equality policy, so that is a requirement from all groups who apply. We do have some templates available on our website if you need a starting point for that. But the most important thing is that it must reference the Equality Act 2010. Now, the Equality Act 2010 it's the legal framework that protects individuals from discrimination in the UK. And so by referencing this, groups show that they understand their legal responsibilities and are committed to preventing discrimination in their activities, services, employment, and they promote diversity and inclusion within their organisation. And they ensure accessibility where possible so that everyone, regardless of background, can participate. So having an equality policy is not just about meeting legal requirements, but it does help build trust, reach diverse communities and create positive change. So this is why it's a key requirement for funding. So even if a group is focused on supporting a specific community, their equality policy must still reference the Equality Act 2010. So it just ensures that they operate fairly. And you'll see a couple of other policies here. So there's a child protection policy and vulnerable adults policy. So with these ones, you only need to submit them if you're specifically working with children or you're specifically working with vulnerable adults. If you're not, then you don't need to worry about those ones. And just a tip at the end, so you must ensure that these policies are formally adopted by your management committee. That's kind of it in terms of what we ask for the supporting documents. And now I'm just going to go through sort of what we check in our due diligence. So common reasons for rejection, it could be things like missing documents, or it could be things like documents not being signed. We do look at the account, so incomplete or unclear financial records. For example, if you have to report your accounts on the Charity Commission or Companies House, we would also check here. And for example, if they're overdue or haven't been submitted, that would be ineligible. So we do sort of a check everywhere. And other reasons could be governance issues. So, for example, not enough committee members, no dissolution clause. It could be a CIC that has a person with significant control. So we would check for all things like that. Yeah, I'm just seeing that's, yeah, and that's kind of it for that side. But yeah, so we would say just double check your documents before applying for an application, and just to avoid delays or rejection. If you're unsure, then you can always ask us and we can have a look through it. That's absolutely fine. And this is just an overview of charity and community structures. It's very brief, but these are the types of groups that we fund. And if you've not set up as a group yet, we would strongly advise you to get in touch with your local infrastructure organisation, and we can give contacts at the end for that. So you'll see this first one, is an unincorporated association. So this is a simple structure suitable for small volunteer-run groups. So it doesn't require formal registration, but it does lack a separate legal identity. So that just means that members can be personally liable for debts. And then that brings us to the charitable trust. So these are your straight up charities. So they're established to manage assets or funds for charitable purposes. And this is typically governed by trustees. So this structure, it's common when the primary focus is managing investments or property for charitable aims. Then we have a charitable incorporated organisation, or a CIO. So this is a legal form specifically for charities, and they provide a distinct legal identity and limited liability for members and trustees. So CIOs, they have to register with the Charity Commission, and it's suitable for organisations that own property or employ staff. And then we have company limited by guarantee. So that's often adopted by non-profit groups, and this structure provides limited liability and a separate legal identity. So this one, it requires registration with Companies House and is charitable with the Charity Commission as well. And then we have CICs. So they are designed for social enterprises that want to use their profits and assets for public good. And CICs are subject to specific regulations to ensure that they benefit the community. So yeah, if you've not got to this stage yet, like I say, it's great to speak to your local infrastructure organisation and choose a structure that aligns with your group's mission and legal needs. And that brings us to the end of the slides. Our contact details are there, and I will share kind of links at the end. So thank you. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. And what I'll do is we can ask, if anybody wants to ask any questions, we can stop the recording and you can ask away. And what I will say as well, if there's anything that you wanted to ask us later, not necessarily on this call, then you can email us if anything sort of comes to mind later and you've got a question, then you can give us an email and we can respond. But this forum is also for sharing. So if you've got any events coming up, or anything that you're working on that you want to talk about, then you're welcome to do that here. Oh, thank you, Laura, for sharing that. Okay.
I can read Katie's question out if you like.
Oh, yeah.
So does funding apply to existing ongoing projects as well as new startups?
Yes. So yeah, funding. So we can offer funding for repeat projects, but we do have kind of specific rules in place. So groups, they can't have more than 2 grants open at the same time. And if they do have 2 grants open, they have to be from different funds and for different projects. So if you wanted repeat funding, you would have to complete your original grant. You have to do an end of grant report, and that needs to get signed off by the grants team. And then when that's complete, then you would be welcome to apply for funding again. I mean, funding is never guaranteed. So what I would say is if you're applying for repeat funding, we have seen before, sometimes people just put in the same application, and actually what we'd like to see is kind of the impact from the first time you did it, because that just makes it a bit stronger. It makes it a stronger case. I hope that helps. And thank you, Susan. I've just seen your message. I'm glad that was helpful. You're welcome. Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions, you can have half an hour back. And I'm wishing you all a good day. As I say, we will send the slides to you so you can have a look at them. And if you've got any further questions in the meantime, feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wishing you all a good day, and we will speak to you soon. Bye.